Cinematography is all about shaping light. What if you don't have any lights to shape? I shot a short film in New Zealand earlier this year with no lighting, just my cameras, and we're gonna break down some of the shots. So let's get into it. Now, starting with the opening shot of the film here, we used one of the big principles in cinematography, and that is that backlighting looks so much better than pretty much anything else. And this was really easy to do in this shot because we were inside the plane and the light was coming from outside. So she was just sitting by the window here and I was in the seat next to her, so it was really easy to just get this shot. This is really basic. All I did was expose for the outside so we could see outside a bit, and because of the pretty good dynamic range on the Lumix S1 II, we didn't necessarily have to crush all of these shadows right here. This shot actually was much brighter in the shadows, and then I actually darkened the shadows a lot just to create that contrast. Now moving on to a similar shot, if we go to maybe this shot, this is actually me right here. But we can see here I've actually exposed it quite differently because you can see that the window is fully blown out, and we can see a bit more detail in the shadows here because what is out there isn't as important in this one. So I just exposed it for the inside and I wanted to blow out the windows here. And in this whole sequence in the plane, it was really easy to backlight because I was further inside. I was in the aisle side of where she was and the windows were always on the other side. So it was really easy to backlight that. And moving on, the next one I want to talk about, this one I don't actually want to talk about, but you can see this is just incidentally, this is backlit. It looks so much better. We've got a nice outline on this bird here on the side, and then the side that we're shooting on is a bit dark. And the light's actually pretty soft because it was an overcast day. So that was just sort of a fortunate turn of events. And if we move on to this sequence here. So this shot I really like. The close up on the foot, stepping into frame, and that sort of transitions into the next scene, and it goes with the music and everything else as well. By the way, I will link the actual film itself in the description, so you can go check that out if you want to see the whole thing. I'll try not to spoil anything in this breakdown, but maybe go watch the film first and then come back in case you're worried about spoilers. But this shot, pretty much we're utilizing all the same thing, where it's just all natural light. The light was coming from up this direction here, so we're backlit on the side we're shooting on. If I was on the other side, one, my shadow would be a bit of an issue, and two, the boot itself would just look really flat and everything's just all the same level, whereas we want contrast. When it's sort of good here where we've got the dark green, and then we've got the reflection from the ice, and then the dark of the boot, and then the light of the boot, and then we've just got all this sort of different levels. And ideally, we would want a little bit more of that sort of checkerboard across the frame, but without being able to like augment the light, it's kind of hard to do. And moving on to the wide shot of this bit. Now this one we had to do in one take because, as you can see right here, her boot just fully goes into the mud there, so we didn't want to have to retake this with a boot already muddy. Now this shot, I liked having the wide, and we did this whole sequence as a wide, and then we added a couple of inserts. And for the most part, I like the composition of this shot and the lighting, except for the fact that we're getting some weird flares. As you can see actually here, we're getting this blue flare all over here, and this I'm pretty sure is a flare. I don't think that is what the trees actually look like. So we're getting a lot of flaring, but it's not like nice flaring. I was just shooting on the Sigma 28-105 2.8, which is a pretty clean lens, so the flares aren't gonna be all crazy. And the flares just didn't look nice. So I guess if I shot it on different lenses, we might have got some nicer flares that we would have liked here, but I don't really like how it ended up flaring in this one. But as you can see when she comes down here, we are still getting that backlight on her. You can see like we're getting like a full outline from the sun, which is a lot of the time what you want in cases like this. But luckily, again, because of the good dynamic range of the S1 II, and the fact that we were just fully outside, we were still getting a lot of level on here from the sky sort of behind me. And honestly, there's not a whole lot else that I would have done if I was lighting this properly. Like a wide shot like this, or potentially maybe would have even gone even wider. A wide shot like this doesn't really need too much else, especially if we're using the sun as our main source. So maybe we put in some neg, or maybe like a bounce somewhere to fill in some shadows, but for the most part, this is basically all we're gonna get. And then moving on to, the close-up. This one probably should honestly stop down a little bit because the background is just all blurry, whereas these are some really nice looking mountains back here. So maybe should have stopped down a little bit. But one thing that maybe I would have changed for this shot is just to come around on her left side here. So if I was shooting more this way and then not have her turn her head that much, because you can see this is actually the lit side now. Whereas if we go back to the wide, this side on her right should be the lit side here. So we're changing which side is lit, but that was mainly because of the way that she was looking. And then if we go on to, where is it? This one. I really like this one. I like this for a few reasons. One, the background is gorgeous. We've got the mountains in there. We've got so many layers. We've got the sky, the clouds, the mountains in the background, this big hill right here, all of these rocks, the grass, the trees back here. And we've got a little bit of foreground. It would have been good to maybe have a bit more foreground. For this one, the sun may have gone behind a cloud, so it might have been a little bit softer, a little bit more overcast, but we're still getting a decent backlight. It is sort of on this side here and then a little bit behind it. Like it's not really hitting this shoulder too much, but it is coming around behind here and hitting sort of that top of the hood on her jacket and the beanie, and of course this side here. And I really like this shot, and I kind of wish that the wide shot that had the entire sequence looked a bit more like this, because this shot definitely I think looks way better. Now if I was to shoot this again with all the gear, I would probably have put some neg on this side so to create a bit more of a shadow on her left side here, and then maybe a bounce or even a light on this side here to sort of wrap that sunlight around onto this side of her face. So we have more of that sort of one side lighting. The light's coming in on this side, but it's not on this side. Whereas we're getting a lot of bounce from, I guess not really bounce, it's just from the sky over here on the right side of the frame. And like I said, maybe I would have lowered the camera a little bit more and put something in the foreground a little bit just to create another layer of that depth, especially because we were shooting on a, I can't remember what the focal length was exactly. It may have been 105. I did try to shoot a lot of stuff at those longer focal lengths just because I like longer focal lengths. Now this sequence we had with the climbing the tree, the sun was sort of over on this right side and it was coming, so you can see it's sort of hitting her entire back. But again, it was an overcast day. We shot this on the same day as that last scene. We actually shot this slightly before because we went on this hike up the hill. This is actually the hill that was in the background of that other shot. We came down the hill after shooting this, and then we shot that bit down by the lake. But with this one, again, I just tried to stay on the shadow side. I always shot so that the subject was backlit. And then if we move on to the next shot here, this one's a little bit less backlit, but because it is overcast, the sky is just really bright in general. And we've got a little bit more coming from the right side compared to the left, especially because we've got this tree. This tree's basically acting as a bit of a negative fill. So we can see this side of her face very slightly darker than this. Maybe I would have liked to add a bounce on this side or maybe a little bit more neg on this side just to create a little bit more contrast between the left and right side of her face. But I think using the tree as neg and using the sky as bounce, or I guess our key, worked to a decent level. And then the next shot here that we want to talk about, now this one was a similar sort of angle, and this one I intentionally added this sort of layer here to create that more depth. So we've got the layer back here, we've got these trees, we've got this tree that she's leaning against, and then we have this sort of hill in the front, and I wanted to make sure I got back that just so we can add that more depth. And then I've got her on the thirds line as well. And then the final shot in this sequence, now this one I actually quite liked. This was actually the one when I uploaded it to YouTube that YouTube decided was potentially one of the thumbnails. But we've got the really bright sky up here, and that is sort of lighting all of this. The tree in the foreground adding a bit of depth in that foreground. Maybe should have stopped down a little bit so it's less blurry because it is kind of just a bit of a mess right now, as with this tree back here. And then we've got the face in here, but because she's wearing a hood, it's like it's gonna be very dark. But we made sure that there's a little gap here that the sun can actually come through and light, so that it was almost like acting as a bit of an edge light for like her nose and her cheek here. So we've got all these little bits of light coming through this small gap on the right side of her face, and that I really liked. We just had to make sure this angle was right, and I think it turned out really well for this shot. Okay, and now the final sequence that I'm going to talk about. Now this is at the end of the film, so I guess potentially spoilers. But this shot, first of all, this lake was freezing, but we shot obviously everything that had to be in the water, but then everything that didn't have to be in the water, like the close-ups, we actually shot on the shore, like just here right in front of the camera. So let's talk about this shot first. Obviously we have all of our layers, but because it was late in the afternoon, the sun, I think the sun might have actually already been behind the hill behind me. There wasn't much of sort of depth created by that sun. Would have been good if maybe the sun was like still hitting some of these mountains in the background. That would have been really nice. Or potentially even just fully backlighting her when we switch to the close-ups. But with this shot in particular, like we have these layers, they're just a little flat because it's all the same color. Same with the water because we're getting a reflection of the mountains. But the ripples do sort of break it up a little bit. And then I just made sure that there was a little bit of the rocks in front because this was like the shore was just entirely rocks. There was no sand here, it was just all rocks at this lake. Let's go into our other close-up here. Now this shot, not super proud of. There's not really any depth to this. It's very flat. Like I like that there's at least a few different colors in the background, but there's not a whole lot of that checkerboard. There's not a whole lot of difference in the levels. It would be good if we could have some sun coming through here, maybe lighting this and then not lighting this and then lighting this and not lighting this, or like creating some sort of line across the rocks behind. And two, you can see like the lighting on her face here is very flat. What I would have done if I had even just a single negative fill 4x or like even one of the round twist up reflectors, I would have put that here just to darken this side of the face because we're treating this side as our lit side. So you can see I'm slightly on the talent's right side. So I'm looking at the shadow side, but there's just no shadow here. I tried to do a little bit in post where I darken the side of the face, but I'm not a colorist, so I'm not gonna spend ages trying to make it look good because I don't really know the best ways to do that. I'm sure a good colorist could probably make that work, but I'm not a colorist. So ideally what would have happened is we did this properly in production where we, at the very least, added some negative fill just to darken this side of the face. And then if we had more stuff, yeah, maybe add a light or a bounce or something on this side. A backlight would have been really good. Again, like I said, the sun was already behind the hill back here, so if we shot it maybe slightly earlier in the day where the sun was still peeking through, that would have given like a nice sort of outline better than what it is right now. Like it's not too bad now. We can see there's still a little bit of that sort of backlight effect, but not as much as it would have been if it was actual harsh sunlight. And that's pretty much it for the breakdown of this short film. Again, it's up on my YouTube channel. You can go check it out in the link in the description. But I think what I want you to take away from this is, one, you can shoot great stuff without lighting it too much. However, that doesn't mean if you don't have access to lights that you just do nothing. The goal should always be to make it look as good as it can to suit the story. And again, backlight, it looks so much better. But that'll be all for this one. I hope that helped. Go check out the short film and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.